In this Olympic year, the road to Sochi brings us to Park City, Utah, site of the 2002 Olympic Games. This is stop number 2 on the FIBT World Cup Bobsled and Skeleton Tour. It's 4-man bobsled from Utah Olympic Park. Hi again, everyone. I'm Tim Singer, pleased to be joined by John Morgan. And John, you have not seen the likes of this in many, many years. As we look back at the first heat earlier today in 4-man competition, to the 100th of a second, we have 3 sleds.
Team Stephen Holcomb, first guy out of the blocks. Might have been dealing with an unfair track because it's been snowing here, but he took his brand new night train sled to the finish. He was the leader.
Also having a great run going early in that first heat was the Russian sled piloted by Alexander Kazyanov.
Kazyanov won this race, was in first place with this race last year in the first heat, but faltered in the second run. And boy, he didn't have as good a start time as Holcomb, but he came down with a blistering speed on the bottom part of the track, caught Holcomb, and he tied him.
And then later in the first heat, with unfavorable track conditions after it had been snowing for 20 minutes, down came the German pilot of Maximilian Arndt and team.
Yeah, the present world champion in 4-man bobsled. Didn't have the start Holcomb had, similar to Kazyanov, but at the bottom part of the track, he found some unbelievable speed, and he tied the other 2 sleds, something I've never seen in my lifetime.
In all of our years, we've seen 3-way ties somewhere back in the standings. We have never seen a 3-way tie to the 100th of the second at the top of the standings. This will build to a great conclusion. Canada having a good race as well, with 3 in the top 10. And you have some other American sleds, including the ones piloted by Nick Cunningham and Corey Butner, also competing, as they will go 20-1 here in run number 2. John, why so close? The shortness of the track, the weather conditions, all of the above?
The personality of this track is always ties. They've always had this. It's a short track of 1,300 meters, high speed, and this track's always had ties in competitions.
Still cool, not as cold as it was below 0 last night for the action, but the snow and the cold temperatures certainly will impact the competition, with the second run coming up in just a moment. The start list is a reflection in reverse of what they did in the first run, so Simona Bartazzo will be the snowplow, breaking things away here to open up the second run, with the American Stephen Holcomb and the 2 sleds he's tied with going 18th, 19th, and 20th. And Holcomb, despite going first,
I don't understand,
will go last here.
I don't understand.
So maybe it's exactly reverse on how they went in the first run. That would tend to make more sense on a normal day.
So question of who wants to post the time, get into the clubhouse and watch the other 2 guys compete. So put your seatbelts on. It's going to be a great race. To
the top of the track now here in Park City, Utah. The first of 20 to go. Italy, piloted by Simona Bartazzo, with Francesca Costa, Giorgio Berdini, and William Frolani. And John, on this very first sled, talk about just how difficult it is for 4 big guys to sprint on the ice and load into a rather small metal machine.
Yeah, the metal machine, we talk about them loading into a small bathtub. And then they got to rock down the sled down the track with it. Aerodynamics. Simone, just beautiful helmets. Beautiful, typical Italians, great clothing. Start time deficiency 5 flat. You're going to see the good teams getting the low 80s. You might even see a 78 or 79.
Nonetheless, consistency, that is to the 100th of a second, the same start time they had in run number 1. World Cup bobsledding is 2 heats, a combined time competition. So the clock on your right side is added on from their 47.83 downtime in the first heat.
67th sled to come down this track in 3 hours. They haven't had a lot of time to prepare it. It's been snowing. Track crew's been doing a great job. Had some problems with the clocks. That's because of the snow. And we've had a very, very exciting bobsled races so far here the last couple of days.
85 miles an hour around the finish in a time of 47.84, only 100th of a second slower. So they tied their start time. They were only 100th off on their downtime. Consistency from the Italians, if not excellence.
That's a better run than he had in his first run, because he should have been a little bit slower here. So obviously he didn't have a very good first run. The holes in the push bar, that's to get the weight out of the sled, have bigger guys pushing the sled, you're pushing a lighter sled. There is a minimum weight on the sled though, so there's a little balance there. Watch the runner tips here. Look at the shoulders. You see any helmets or anybody behind? Yeah, we can see some bouncing, not good aerodynamic profile. You can see the guy in the back. Into the finish, this is the graveyard. This is where you can lose a lot of time. You're going uphill. But Simone says, I'm going to the winner's box.
Jan Virba is the pilot of the lone Czech Republic sled in today's competition. They had a 4:95 start in run number 1. Dominik Dvorak, Dominik Sushi, and Mikhail Vacek, the rest of the team.
Tim, there's the sled built by your father.
Zinga. Czech Republic back about 10 years ago had great push times. They were 19th out of 20 in the first run, 489. That's an improvement by 600. So all things being equal, they should move ahead of the Italians by a wide margin here.
Watch the left side of your screen. Look for that 85.9. That's a half a kilometer better than the Italians. And that is result of your push time and your velocity, meaning getting in the sled. That's a real good thing to keep track of if you want to see how good somebody's doing coming down the track.
Great sound these bobsled make, so much noisier than the two-man, a lot noisier obviously than the skeleton sleds. It's like being at Talladega.
136 kilometer speed.
0.2 of a second up.
As expected.
So they were only 300ths up after the first run. They extend that, and that all happened at the start. Wasn't a perfect drive, but not bad. How about this crowd sticking around all weekend long, John, with the cold temperatures and the snow? These guys love their bobsled.
Well, the thing is that there's no completion. It's first heat, second heat, second heat. So it runs for 4 straight hours. We've had barely time to take bathroom breaks, Tim. So there's
barely. We have not had time.
You know, and good start. Get in, get down, cat-like movements before the first curve. You want anybody moving? Not bad. A little bit late in the push bars. Look at the heads here. This is when you're going 80 miles an hour. Aerodynamics in the straightaway. A little late because you saw some heads going left to right.
At the turn of the century, France dominated four-man, or at least they were very much part of the picture, with pilot Bruno Mangeon winning the 1999 World Championship, also a bronze medal at the 98 Winter Olympic Games. They've been suffering through down periods for the last 10 years or so. But we like what we see from Louis Couster, a young pilot on his first year in the World Cup. Not the fastest times, but a good driver, John.
He impressed us last night when we saw him in the two-man bobsled yesterday. You know, he's not getting bad start times either. You know, Henrik Ribet, Lefort, 495.
The track in the French Alps in Le Plan, the Savoie region, did not host a race for many years after the Olympics, but the last 2 years, the World Cup's been back there, so that's good for both the sport and for this French program.
You know, he didn't have as good a start time, 600s worse than the Czechs, but he had a better velocity. So, good straight lines. This track, very similar to Le Plan, high speeds, but Le Plan is 150 meters longer. But these are good lines, but he's not. He's 20 hundredths off the pace. This is perplexing.
So down to the finish. It's the Czech Republic with the lead, the French falling behind 1 spot. We still have 17 sleds to come. When we return, it will be American Nick Cunningham coming down the track.
The entry into Wasatch. Good line. You can see the track lines, and look at that push bar coming out. Surprised at that. Here he is down the bottom part of the track, and you know, some good lines, but nice to see France back on the World Cup Tour. And I'm impressed with this guy. First time we've seen him this year.
Next up, we have the first of 3 sleds from Russia. Nikita Zakharov, Ivar Husen, Peter Moseyev and big Alexei Voyevoda.
Snow's coming down. Look at the prep the team's doing. Look for that light. Can we see that light up front left side? Maybe our cameraman. See, he hadn't started up there. See that light up there on the left? It's for 0-0. As soon as you're going to hear a bell here pretty quick. When that bell goes.
The first of 3 Russian sleds. And a big wait for them, John, at the top after they cleared that track.
They didn't clear the track till just now, Tim, which I'm surprised it took that long. Oh, he reset here by the driver. 492 in the first run for these very large human beings trying to fit into this small bathtub. 489, so much better.
You know, it's funny, you would think after being exhausted and working out, second runs would always be slower than the first runs at the start, but they just dig deep and they find a little more.
I think it's getting a little warmer out. I think the ice is being a little bit more accommodating. It was really cold and snowy this morning, and with all the times that the track crews sweeping up there, everybody we saw in the women's competition had better start times.
Sport of bobsled was created by putting 2 little toboggans together, and that was all for fun and excitement. Now it is a high-tech, high-machine sport, 400ths of a second separating this team from the Czech Republic team with the lead at the bottom.
Going to be close, good speed, doesn't have it, and the Czechs move up 2 spots. That's good for John Vibra. The Russians perplexing, they had a better start time, and Voyevoda, the biggest, strongest man in the sport of bobsledding, whose hands are unbelievable how big this guy is. Look at the size of him in the back.
Arm wrestling champion,
in
right?
Russia, but boy, you don't want to meet him in a darker alley.
He's probably a nice guy.
He's a great guy.
You want him on your side in
Beautiful
that
guy.
dark alley.
Yes. Look at the size of these 4 big men. In, down, before the first curve, no movement when he steers around that first curve. That's pretty good. Just don't know where he lost it down here because he should have had a better time than that. Look at the runner tips. Good aerodynamics behind. We can see some shoulders back there, but that's pretty good. Good entry into the Wasatch curve.
It was a great night last night for American pilot Nick Cunningham, who took his best ever World Cup result, a silver medal with Dallas Robinson in the 2-man. Now joining Cunningham in the 4-man sled, Olympic gold medalist Justin Olson, Johnny Quinn, and Abe Morlew. Morlew, the brakeman, a great story, which I'll tell you in a second after this start.
Was Olson on that sled in the first heat?
Yes, he was.
Let's go for each other.
The Bodine sled off and on its way. 484 start in the first run. Morlew, born in Liberia, played football in Canada, competed for Switzerland in bobsled, and now with the United States, a resident of North Carolina. Their start time of 487.
Speed 86.4. You'd expect that to be the best velocity at an exit of 3. Cunningham, with the 2000s lead, should be able to negotiate this track, which he did last night for a silver medal, but he's losing a little time back.
He had a 1/10 of a second lead over the Czech Republic after the first run. They've extended that by just 200ths. We've seen all weekend long how fast these American sleds have been down at the bottom of the track. So
oh, 100th of a second.
So a little bit of a mini drama there. Big exciting news for the Czech Republic as they move up another spot.
They moved up 3 places.
Yeah, nations are vying. Nations are vying for positions for the Olympics, and where they finish, even if it's not in the top 10, is important.
Well, they were 300 slower at the start in that run compared to the Czechs. 495, and then this run, the Czechs went 700s faster at the start. The Americans went 300 slower at the start. That's how he lost it by 100th of a second. Down here on the bottom, it was already done, but you know, he's pretty straight. Look at the speed. Well, the other thing too is those guys, well, no one else will ever match those speeds. You know why, Tim?
The snow.
The snow and the ice. The ice is getting cut up. Every sled comes down, cuts the ice up more. It's tough to attain that top speed. We see that all the time at all the World Cups.
The Czechs lead the way, and here is the second Swiss sled to come down. World Cup two-man champion, Beat Hefty. Incidentally, Hefty, this pilot, has the track record here back at the 2002 Olympic Games. That was as a brakeman for Martin Annen. He made the switch in 2004 to the front seat, or 2007 rather, and is one of the best two-man pilots in the world, John, but really an example of the big differences between two-man and four-man bobsled.
He's a good two-man pilot on the short 1,300 meter tracks like in Innsbruck and here in Winterberg. And the four-man, he's not really in love with the four-man the way he is the two-man.
And some have the reverse issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Zubkov for years was a great four-man pilot. Took him a while to get the two-man act down.
Max Arndt is a great four-man pilot. Doesn't do well in the two-man because it gives up a little bit, but the secret is to be good in both, which 2100s lead.
Sort of like leading the tour in driving distance and putting accuracy.
That's a very good combination of golf. He lost a little bit back. These are good lines for Beat Hefty. He's going to have to make some major mistake down here not to be the leader.
Hefty with a 1500s advantage over the Czech Republic entering the heat. He still has that same 1500s advantage. Pretty good line in the uphill section, 83.5 miles an hour, and he holds on to the lead by 600ths of a second. Still the top sleds ahead here in Park City, Utah, World Cup #2. Stick around.
Hefty, he's the leader now, but he's just doing World Cup points. Doesn't like the four-man. His great brakeman, Thomas Lamparter, will be back with him when the World Cup returns to Europe in Winterberg, and my money is on him to win the two-man race. And the Swiss went way up, which sort of delays the next sled from coming, which is a great old strategy that the Swiss designed probably 70 years ago. Make the other sled wait when it's snowing.
The Swiss wrote a lot of rules in this sport. John Jackson is the pilot for Great Britain, and they are waiting for the track to be cleared in just a moment here.
See, they're all waiting. The track can't be cleared. Those other guys are still on the sled, and I bet you if we look, the Swiss are taking their time getting out of that finish ramp.
Jackson joined on the sled by Craig Pickering, Bruce Tasker, and Joel Fearon, and still no clearing of the track. Tim Singer along with John Morgan here in Park City, Utah. We're down to our final 14 sleds, counting up to American Stephen Holcomb, who's tied for the lead after the first run. This is Great Britain, piloted by the man whom they call Jacko, John James Jackson.
Tore his Achilles tendon up in April. It is amazing the man is even here, and it's says something about his British squad who provides him with a great start.
Great athletes, no question about it. We saw Jackson limp away after the first run. Is it even advisable to be competing at this level this early and so soon after surgery?
I'm not a sports medicine expert, but I do know that Achilles tendons usually take longer than 5 months to heal when you have to bring your body to a world-class stage like this. So kudos to him.
Had a great year last year, 5th in the World Cup standings on a re-emerging British program. 1400s as he opens his lead up on the Swiss.
Should be enough. Speed's decent. Might lose a little bit back. Should be the leader. He is.
Terrific run, 47.60.
They're running on 3 cylinders.
And we'll watch him just limp out of this sled.
He's
all courage and all gaining some experience, hoping he'll peak and be healthy by the Olympics.
Good athletes. He's
look
got
at him
behind
wince,
him.
John.
Look, I mean, this guy, red badge of courage here for Jocko. I mean, give him a hand here, folks. This guy is, and he has to come out here and compete. He needs points into the Olympic Games. Look at the start. Now, he'll probably get in real early. I mean, he's running on one leg. His teammates, all great track and field athletes. The British have brought some athletes to four-man bobsled in the last 2 years. Look at John Jackson.
Second of 3 sleds from the United States. This one piloted by Corey Butner, 32 years old, California native. Behind him, Chuck Berkeley, Chris Langton, and Adam Clark. Clark's first race of the year, John.
Well, again, I don't know why they're delaying this, but they're running the sleds probably at a 2-minute pace. The clock hasn't started down there yet. There. So as soon as that thing went green, they took off.
Ooh, a little bit of a problem keeping that runner in the grooves there at the start.
Let's see what that costs.
486, best start so far. 500's up on the leaders down at the bottom.
486 in the first heat consistency. Now we want to see 86.6 here, 86.3. That's not very good. That's not very good. That might have something to do. We saw that sled come out of the groove at the start. Not good velocity.
Corey Butner finished 4th in last night's two-man competition. Last year, he was a two-man specialist, 3rd overall in the World Cup standings. He falls behind the Swiss at the latest split.
British at the bottom in the lead.
Oh, the British, right, thank you.
Yeah, he's lost it all. I tell you, I think his nemesis was that start. Something happened at the start. He didn't have the velocity he should have had with that start. How many places is he going to fall now? Sixth best time of the run.
Falls back 2 spots. So, John, the starts have been subpar for the Americans, but as we look at that tie for the lead after the first round, which includes American Steve Holcomb, is it possible the United States has not set up these sleds as well here in the second round?
Well, you know, it's...
Anything's possible.
Butler's not that great a four-man driver. Cunningham did much better in four-man last year than Butner. These guys can't figure it out, but something happened here at the start. Look at the groove. Look at it. They lifted that up. Look at that. That's it. That's it right there. That whole thing. Look at this. Look at it's out of the grooves. That's why he didn't have that velocity. I said right away, with that start time, fast time, but he didn't have the velocity. He had the clock here, gives him the 86 start time, but then down 200 meters, the velocity as they entered the sled wasn't there, and that was because of that mishap at the start.
If not the fastest, certainly the tallest team on the World Cup circuit, the four-man Dutch squad of Edwin van Kokke, Arnold van Kokke, Zebran Jansma, and Arno Klaassen. Look how big these guys are. And Zebran was telling me they still need to put on weight. They're a little underweight right now. And he's been eating a lot, trying to lift weight. The heavier the athletes are, the less weight you can put in the sled, but that's better.
And it's the minimum weight of the sled. We've seen teams get disqualified for having a sled that's too light. So they want to load up with these huge men. These guys are huge, but they're also tall, and I really come down on these guys for not having good aerodynamic proficiency. .491 start in the first heat, only 14th best from a team that usually has the best 6 or 7 start times. Just watch these heads. You're going to see that number 2 guy is Arnold van Kokke's, the brother of Edwin. Just slop it around like a ping pong ball. 86.2, considering that start they had. That should have been better. But watch how you can see the helmets of the Dutch all over the place.
Falling behind Great Britain, so Jackson could pick up another 300s. Is a big problem there in the straightaway. They'll fall further back now.
Yeah, and again, they're the tallest team in the competition, but they got to find a way to get in that sled, get a little bit lower. I've only been telling them that for 3 years. 135.6 isn't bad speed.
84.3 miles an hour around the finish. They drop
time.
back 1 spot, and John Jackson and company from Great Britain now knocking on the door of a top 10 finish.
Hats off to John Jocko Jackson to do what he's done today. Team Edwin van Kokke. 6'7", 6'4", 6'5", 6'3". Huge men should have the leverage here.
But just trying to load into this.
They're in quickly. They're in. Watch this. They're going to be in down before the first curve. No, they're still playing with push bar. Oh, see the arms come over the top there? That means they're moving in that first curve, and then this is just a driver mistake that is uncalled for. You need to be clean in that Albert's Alley to slingshot affect yourself on the bottom part of the track.
The first of 3 German sleds in the top 11. A nation that has dominated the sport like no other over the past 50 years. This is a young pilot, the future of this sport, Francesco Friedrich, already with 2 World Championship medals. Alex Mann, Gregor Birnbach, and Torsten Margis make up the crew.
There's the light going green. They sent him immediately.
for start time in the first heat of 4:86, the 8th fastest start time, and they
Match it.
meet to the 100th of a second. They match it, right?
But the key is going to be how he gets down this straightaway. Watch him enter here. Watch middle of the straightaway. Yes, so he should have 86.3. That's not very good. So they didn't have a very good entry into the sled. That's only 700ths up. Now, he won a bronze medal last night in two-man. He's still feeling his way around a four-man. He's only 23 years old. We could see him for a couple more Olympics. That is horrific. There's no way he's going to be able to keep that speed in the bottom. There's the red numbers. So
600ths back now. So the German sled in danger of dropping out of the top
no
10.
speed.
And Great Britain leading the way midway through the second run. We still have the top 10 to come, including the 3 sleds tied to the 100th of a second for the lead.
That's perplexing right there, but you can tell this young German pilot isn't as familiar with the four-man. Start, they look at the runners were perfect. I don't understand why they didn't have a better velocity with the 4:86 start time. Let's see him get in. These are huge men. I mean, they're getting into a small bathtub. They sit down, get in there buried. Now watch this mistake. Just came out too early, and I mean, you can't do that. Four-man bobsledding. Once you get those sleds into a skid like that, but this kid's going to learn. Don't worry, you're going to be seeing him for 2 or 3 more Olympics.
3 Canadians in the top 10 here after the first run. This is the first of those 3, 26-year-old Justin Cripps. Again, waiting for the track to be cleared, and then they'll be off and running.
Come on, guys, let's go. Let's go, boys.
Snowing here in Park City, Utah. Tim Singer along with John Morgan. This is Canada. Justin Cripps along with Tim Randall, James McNaughton, and Brian Barnett.
We talked about how unbelievable athletes are in the USA women's bobsled program. The Canadians have done the same here, men and women, for both Canada and the US. We used to be also rans against the Europeans. Canada and the US are merging as top powers in the sport.
Well, a great story we'll be following all season long is only 3 nations will qualify 3 sleds at the Olympic Games. Canada, Russia, Germany, and the USA are 4 nations probably battling. Only one of them will get to send 2 sleds.
1200s to 700s, Justin Cripps really showing some progress. Down to 3, this isn't good. Jocko Jackson gonna pick off somebody else here unless he's got some huge speed. He doesn't have it. This is right to the 100th. I like the British.
84 miles an hour.
100th of a second.
By 100th of a second. Great day for John Jackson of Great Britain, now moving into the top 9.
How about how many times we've seen hundredths of a second decide heat? I mean, it's that track's persona here.
Earlier this day, 2 American women's bobsleds tied to the 100th of a second for the silver medal. And again, the big story here later on, 3 teams tied for the lead to the 100th of a second after the first run, the Germans, the Russians, and the Americans.
Look at the head staying straight on your shoulders. In, down, and we want to see these guys settle before the first curve. And they're right on the edge of the first curve. That might be where they didn't have the great velocity in the curve 3. Look at the 7th best speed in the bottom. But, you know, like I said, that's not going to change. All those guys are going to, Bertazzo, he's the first guy down. So he's going to maintain that best speed forever. And that happens on every track.
The next German set to go, the Olympic silver medalist in 2-man competition, the veteran Thomas Florschütz, 35 years old from Sonnenberg, the brother of a 3-time luge world champion. Florschütz taking second at the Vancouver Games. He's been battling injuries over the last couple of years, trying to make one more push to another Olympic medal. But John, there are still some German pilots back in Europe not taking part in the first half of this circuit. They could bump Florschütz the way he's been going here.
I think they're going to hang in there with Florschütz. He's another guy who lost his half of his season with an Achilles injury a couple years ago. 494 start. Wow. Now, 86.4 or 5 here means they had good velocity. 86.1, that's not good. So he's going to have to use his ability to drive, and that was a high cut into that curve. He's already behind. He's continuing to lose more speed. This is the two-man silver medalist from Vancouver. He's a big skid into Wasatch. That's dangerous. This is not the run you would think out of a top world pilot from Germany. And,
Great Britain's John Jackson, who had all top 10 results last year, was in 14th place after the first run.
12th best time of the run.
Jackson now goes into the top 10 as he's picked up yet another.
5 sleds he's picked up, right?
Still the top sleds to come from Park City, Utah.
Perplexing. This German sled, look how low he is. You don't see much. Yeah, you see some shoulders back there, but he's in a bad skid. Trying to correct. He's a four-mans. You just can't get him out of those skids. Look at the coach. Oh, that's just. Thomas Florschitz is not going to leave Park City, Utah with a very positive attitude for the first 2 weeks of competition.
Two Latvian sleds over the course of the next 3 sleds. First, Oscar's Kiebermanis with great start times. They'll be the first to come. A little bit later, we'll see Oscar's Melbardis. Waiting for that track to clear with Great Britain out in front. In 8th place after the first run, this was the Latvian team piloted by Kiebermanis. They had a great start time, John.
Yeah, this is the young Latvian pilot they have a lot of hope for. And a great start time, 4:81. And boy, the Latvians, the biggest, fastest athletes in USA are playing in the NFL. The biggest, fastest athletes in Latvia are bobsleigh for their country.
Great tradition in that nation dating back to 1984 when Sintis Ekmanis, representing the Soviet Union, captured Olympic bronze. They also won gold in 1988. They have a track in Latvia, so they get an ample opportunity to have great runs such as this one, 1200s up on the British.
Losing a little time back here. This is going to be close again. I got to believe the Latvians by 200 or 300.
83.9 miles an hour, 500s the Latvians up, but it was a good run for Great Britain and pilot John Jackson.
Sanders Bruce is very happy with this young pilot. He's got 2 young guys with all this power. Boy, Latvia, the next 4 years, they could be becoming the top power in the sport of bobsled. They're already there in men's skeleton.
No question about that. Well, they have, as I said, great tradition. 2 Olympic medals, a World Cup championship.
How's this line? Wow. Wow. You know, I just can't say enough about these 2 young Latvian pilots. And all 4 of them look like linebackers. Look at them. There's nobody less than 230 there, 225 at the least. And they're smaller than the next Latvian team coming up.
2 Latvians and 2 Canadians in this segment. This is Lyndon Rush, the Olympic bronze medal winner from the 2010 Olympic Games. Joining him on the sled, David Bissett, Lascelles Brown, and Neville Wright. John, this is certainly one of the best pilots in the world. They had a bit of trouble loading the sled in run number 1.
Took away all his velocity.
And what exactly happened? It was one push athlete
couldn't get in. I think it was
knocking
Bissett.
Another one out of the way.
Bissett on the left. Couldn't get in right away, had a double step.
We've seen guys load in sleds backwards. We've seen some guys not get into sled. It's such a difficult maneuver. It's much better this time.
Yeah, they're still getting in the sled around curve 1. 49, that's better than their 94 in the first run. This means he's going to need 86.4 or 5, 86.1.
And this comes from a country that has perhaps the most state-of-the-art push facility, year-round practice indoor ice in the world.
Yeah, but that 1400 down at that clock needs a perfect exit here.
Not bad.
Still 14. He stopped the bleeding. Bottom part of the track, though, I think he's going to run out of track. I don't think he can take over the Latvian. Still at 14. Matt, he's got to be absolutely perfect here and just afterburners, doesn't have it. Latvians are going to knock them out. 11, ran out of track. But I was really not impressed with their velocity. So remember, they're all 4 of them were getting in the sled around curve 1, Tim, and that can't do that here.
Lyndon Rush with a 6th place finish on his home track in Calgary last week. He'll be hard pressed to be in the top 8 or 9 today. So a disappointing start to the season for this Canadian team. He nearly won this race last year, John.
That was a 2-man. Look at the sled lifting up in the air twice. The runners are out. That's why they didn't have velocity. You can't do that. The good teams, the runners just go out maintaining those tracks. When you're lifting that sled up, you're putting the nose down. That is why he didn't have the velocity down below that I talked about. Here on the bottom part of the track, he got it, righted. He was doing good down here, great lines, and he cut into the deficiency. He ran out of track.
No? Hi, Olivia. Hi, Amelia and Harriet. Hey, Mom.
3 kids.
Though back in 6th place after the first run, this is, in many people's estimations, one of the Olympic gold medal favorites. The pilot, Oscar Melbardis from Latvia, had the best start time in the first run, 4.80. More significantly, John, this team captured the gold medal in the 4-man competition at the Olympic test event last year in Sochi.
Started last in the first heat because he was disqualified for being overweight in Calgary last week. They ripped off the best start time in the first heat, 480. They could be 477, 476 here. 480, they match it. Now watch their velocity. This has got to be 86.6 or so.
Melbardis, one of so many athletes that was a great push athlete that moved to the front seat. They take some time. It takes a little time to train to be a great driver.
Well, not everybody's a great driver. You can have the great athletic skill, but you take the 10 athletes bobsledding, you're going to find one of them is a great driver.
700s up at the last split. Down the middle of the straightaway. We'll check out the next speed, 83.8.
Now he's driving himself into a position to move up. Ooh, as I said that, he lost back 100.
Lower point of the track, it's an uphill finish, but he is clean.
Doesn't have the speed, he's going to be close.
Should hang on. He does by 300ths of a second. One Latvian team supplants another, but all the coach can do can smile because he has 2 sleds in the top 6 by the end of the day.
And remember, Melbardis started last in the first heat. He was working with the worst ice on the track. That's a great result for a guy who comes from last in the first heat. Big men. Look at, I talked about how big they are. Look at these guys. Look at the driver. 245 pounds. Look at this. A little high there. That's snowy exits into the labyrinths. But he found some good time on the bottom. Look at 6'3", 245 pounds.
Back when Russian Alexander Zubkov was winning his Olympic medals, as you see the current standings, the Latvians leading the way, he was doing it with great start times and great driving. But now Zubkov really isn't putting in as good a time at the start. We have one more Canadian team still to come here. Chris Spring in squad, so I got ahead of myself with Zubkov. Chris Spring with Jesse Lumsden, Cody Sorensen, and Brian Coakwell, the 29-year-old Australian-born pilot.
There's another runner out of the grooves. .482. That's exactly what they had in the first run. But his first run, they didn't have a mishap like that. 86, what? 86.2 is not good velocity for that speed. And he's in red numbers now.
Spring coming all the way back from a devastating crash in Oldenburg, Germany 2 years ago, and he, just like so many that love this sport, couldn't wait to get back, and he has improved incredibly over the last couple of years.
Very talented driver. He's going to need all his talents here at the bottom to erase that 800. It's down to 700 deficiency. He's still got a chance if he gets 135 kilometer speed.
134.7, 83.7 miles an hour around the finish, and 400s in back of the Latvians. So one Latvian sled into the top 5. No Canadian will end up on the top 5 on this day.
Well, I'm saying now that he was only 200ths off the top speed, but he had very negligible velocity in the speed up top of the track, which means that little runner coming out of the grooves, here it is. When they do this, they push the nose of the sled down. That kills your velocity. It doesn't sound like much. He just lost by 0.03 of a second at the bottom of the track. That's worth something right there. They get in, get down before the first curve. We want to see them all settled before the take-on. The hands were still coming in, but that was pretty good.
After the first run, the top 4 sleds were within 0.04 of a second of one another. The 3 tied for the lead, and this veteran Russian pilot, Alexander Zubkov. As I was saying earlier, a 2-time Olympic medalist. John, he used to do it with great starts and great driving. He's now giving up some at the start, but maybe still as fast as anyone at the bottom.
I think he's trying to peak in February. There's the leaders. Started last in the competition, the first heat, because of the disqualification for overweight last week in Calgary. Great job by those athletes. Zubkov, though, if he gets that velocity,
39-year-old Siberian-born pilot, formerly a luger for the Soviet Union, now one of the greatest in bobsled over the last 10 years. 4:86, not a bad start time. That bodes well for them.
he's going to need the 86.3 or 4 here. He's got the 86.3. That's enough with that start time, which was 700 slower than the Latvians. He's +2, probably +4 at the next clock. And then we're going to see him have a chance in that straightaway. If he has a clean straightaway, here he comes.
Really nice.
Clean straightaway.
Very small steering corrections, nothing that will cost him too much.
Could be green numbers at the next clock.
To the 100th of a second, the Russian trying to chase down the Latvian. Final few curves of the straightaway to the uphill.
Speed.
That could cost him, though, a little tap.
Right to the 100th. Oh!
100th of a second separating the Russian from the Latvian. And John, it was close the whole way. It could have been that tap, despite the big speed down at the bottom.
I'm sure we'll see it in the graveyard. We call it the graveyard because that's the way you throw away your time and chances to win a medal. And Alexander Zubkov was doing what he does best, driving. Look at the start here for, again, huge men. Zubkov is big a driver as we got besides Melbardis. In, down, are they down and clean before the first curve? Yes.
And here is that spot. They had great speed, John, but look at the end of this straightaway.
Going uphill. That little tap there cost him 3 or 4 hundredths and a chance to medal.
If you're joining us, this is one of the closest races in the history of the World Cup. 3 sleds remain here in Park City, Utah. The 4-man bobsled competition. All 3 sleds tied for the lead to the 100th of a second after run number 1. Tim Singer along with John Morgan, pleased to be bringing you the exciting conclusion of this 4-man competition. This is the German pilot, Max Arndt, a world championship medalist. And his big crew of Hubenbacher, Roediger, and Putza, 4:85 their start time.
Should improve. Look how quickly they're down. 486, 100 slower. But they were in that sled early. He had good velocity in the first run. This could be 86.3 or 4 at least. 86.2, but everybody's been a 10th down there, so he's 200ths up. He might fall to even, but he's got as good a drive. It's, ooh, that one looked like a mistake there.
Latvia with the lead down at the bottom, still ahead the Russians and the Americans. This is the final German sled, a nation that's dominated this sport in the past several Olympics.
He's the present world champion because he's got great skills driving these big 4-mans. He's going to need it here in the bottom. Big speed. Should be enough.
84.1 miles an hour to the finish. Max Arndt does it by 300ths of a second. So he sits just outside the medals now. And no, actually, he's qualified at least a bronze medal because he was in that 3-way tie at the top.
Silver medalist last week in Calgary. He tied with Zubkov. This is 24, 25-year-old German.
John, if you're the Russian or the American at the top, how can you help not to be checking that scoreboard to see what that time was?
I'm sure the coaches are saying, don't worry, just go and do your best. Look at that back end come up there. That was weird. Exit of not the Olympic curve, done before 14. Max, nice job.
He medaled, in fact tied for a silver medal last week. Shows you just how close this sport is. Now the second of the three teams tied for the lead after run number one. The Americans on deck. Here is the Russian sled piloted by Alexander Kazyanov. John, in run number one, inexplicably, they moved into that tie despite the 11th fastest start time.
He was the leader at the end of the first run in this competition last year on this track, and he fell to third or fourth. He's been in the position before. He's had one gold medal, I think, in Whistler in November 2012.
But explain how he managed to do that with the 11th best start time. You're always saying it's those teams with the fastest start times.
Talent. He's got some great driving talent, like that guy with the hat on the left, Max Arndt. This Kasanov's been in the shadow of Zubkov. And this would be a way for Kasanov to make a statement that, hey, Alexander Zubkov is the top dog, but I'm coming.
Well, the statement could happen right here with the start time of 4:86. 200's better and the fifth best of the 17 that have come down.
Okay, well, I've been educating everybody top left. 86.3, 86.4. That's really good velocity.
Into the green now, 100th up. The Russian making his way down the track. The Germans with the lead down at the bottom, and the Americans still to come as the final sled.
The exit here needs to be perfect. And a little tap. Still got it up to 200s.
Speed needs to be 84.5 miles an hour down here. The clock coming up in the straightaway, upcoming 300s up.
He controls his own destiny right here in the graveyard.
83.3, not great
Good speed. Close.
To the finish. Here comes the Russian.
No!
100th back. John Morgan, we still have the Americans to come, but have you ever been involved in a closer finish?
No. I just can't believe what we're seeing. We've seen 9 sleds, 8 sleds with 100 seconds in this heat alone.
Actually,
it's fun. It's fun.
The top 6 are separated by just 700ths of a second.
But watch this. This is where it cost him here. This is not how to do it. Max Arndt came right through there on a rail. And that's, look at Pierre Lueders. Oh, no. Look at that. And here's into the straightaway. Look at the brakeman. Look at the brakeman looking up a little bit. Yeah, he goes back down. That's the air comes all the way to the back of those sleds, and the brakeman, where the dirty air exit, has a lot to do with your velocity and your speed.
The Germans, 100th up on the Russians, and now our final sled. Here's your setup. Stephen Holcomb, the American Olympic gold medal winner in 4-man, has won every race so far this season. He's now on his home track in his hometown where he grew up, Park City, Utah. Behind the 3-time world champion is his Olympic gold medal winning push athlete, Kurt Tomasevich, along with Steve Langton and Chris Fote. John, this is to make it a perfect 4 for 4 this season, but we have seen incredibly tight racing this day.
Crowd screaming. He's from Park City. 481 in the first run. 478! Velocity, though. They didn't have the great velocity. He should have 86.6 down here with that type of speed.
We saw a few mistakes from the American
86.8! Best velocity of anybody today.
Now 1700s
Oh!
And what's that about?
That means he's got a lot of time in the bank, but he's been losing time on the bottom part of the track to the Germans. Perfect exit!
Much better than run number 1, 0.2 of a second the advantage now. And
he's pulling
really
away.
Coming through here.
Whoa, he's flying away!
Down to the bottom now, the American squad looking to make it perfect in this Olympic season. They're going to do it. What was a close run number 1 ends up to be a runaway in the end as American Steve Holcomb captures the gold medal. 4 for 4 in this Olympic season. Number 1 says it all. That is clearly where Stephen Holcomb is this year. Is it home cooking with these North American races, or are you looking at a driver who is on the verge of becoming the greatest in the world in this Olympic year? USA takes it over Germany and the Russians in this Park City World Cup. An incredible weekend of racing with domination by the home country. Much more to come from Park City, including the awards ceremony and interviews from the top 3 drivers.
Get the stuff on.
35 hundredths the margin of the Americans over the Germans, so would have been an incredibly tight race for so long. Turns out to be a blowout. The Russians are in third. Also a great day for the Latvians. Chris Spring, the top Canadian. Back here in Park City, Utah, where with 2 gold medals in 2 4-man races, Stephen Holcomb extends his World Cup advantage over Germany's Maximilian Arndt. The World Cup winds its way through until late January, and the finishing place on the World Cup will determine the start order, the very important start order at the Olympic Games. We had 25 sleds at the start. These are all of the top 20 in those World Cup standings. As you see, Americans Cunningham and Butner also in the top 15, 3 Canadians in the top 10. A snowy afternoon in Park City with a huge victory for the Americans. The award ceremony and flower presentation is taking place down in the finish area. Yes, well coordinated down there, guys. So not a lot of emotion as they're pacing themselves for the long season ahead, but it was a big, emphatic exclamation point to a huge weekend for the Americans. And here in the 4-man, the team of Holcomb, Tomasevich, Langton, and Fote with a huge second run away from the field, capturing their 2nd consecutive World Cup race. Just utter domination with great driving, great start times, and great equipment for the Americans. USA with the gold, Germany with the silver, and the bronze medal to the Russians, piloted by Kazyanov. All 3 of those teams are standing by at the finish with John Morgan. Go ahead, John.
Team Alexander Kasanov, bronze medal. You always do good on this track. Philippe talks a little English. 2 good runs.
Yeah, not bad. Only hundreds between second and third. First run was exciting, and second run, a few mistakes. We're third, but it's good.
What does this mean to you guys beating Mr. Zukov?
Who knows what will be?
Congratulations, Kasanov. Nice driving. Now over to Team Max Arndt. Quite a competition, huh?
Auf jeden Fall, also solche Rennen machen immer Spaß. 3 Leute zeitgleich nach dem ersten Lauf, da hat man Freude. Steven hat wieder einen super Job gerade im zweiten gemacht, die Jungs oben von ihm, die Fahrt war gut. Wir haben noch ein paar Defizite, war auch nicht so sauber gefahren von mir, wie ich es mir vorstelle. Aber wir gehen nächste Woche nochmal an und irgendwann kommen wir nach Europa und da wollen wir auf jeden Fall zurückschlagen.
So he's very happy with his runs, not totally, but you know, he comes out here with a silver medal and he's looking forward to going back to Europe. You got to go to Lake Placid next. Okay, congratulations, Team Arndt. Boy, night train too, Steve Holcomb. First, you were the first man down, so you were the snowplow, obviously. But did you realize how good a second run you had?
Not really. I mean, I made a few mistakes in the first run, and I wanted to make sure that I cleaned it up, and we did. Huge start from the guys, the second run. But it was a great race today. I mean, when you're coming down tied for first place for 3 different sleds, it's a great race, and that's what we're all here for. And it was a good day.
Do you guys plan on going faster in the second run at the start?
Yeah, that was the game plan, and luckily we executed.
Congratulations, USA, Germany, and Russia.
Thanks very much, John. Huge weekend here in Park City for the United States. 6 World Cup races, 5 victories, and they captured 10 of the 18 World Cup medals. More home cooking for the Americans next week in Lake Placid. But it's a long season, which moves to Europe for the second half, where the Germans, the Russians, and the rest will certainly have a lot to say heading to the Olympic Games. In fact, as Filip Egorov of Russia just said, who knows what will be. What we do know is the Americans dominated here. USA won, the winners in Park City. For John Morgan, I'm Tim Singer. Thanks for joining us, and so long from Utah Olympic Park.